In the late 1870s, in Buffalo, New York, Albert Southwick worked as a dentist. He treated everyday problems and lived inside a world that seemed routine. But he also paid attention to something new that kept creeping into daily life: electricity. It showed up as a promise: power, speed, modern convenience. For Southwick, it was not a political idea or a moral question, it was a practical one. He followed the talk of electrical devices the way other people followed news about trains or telephones. When new gadgets appeared, he wanted to understand how they worked and what they could do. He approached electricity like a tool that could be tested, improved, and put to use. In his hands, curiosity became a habit. He watched, listened, and kept collecting impressions, one small detail at a time. At this point, nothing connected Southwick to prisons or punishment. He held no public role beyond his practice, and he carried no obvious mission. Still, his interest mattered because it shaped how he reacted to the world around him. He already believed new technology could solve old problems. He already looked for cleaner, faster methods, and without realizing it, he moved closer to an idea that would not stay inside a dental office. It started with talk, not science. Southwick listened as people discussed pain in a blunt, almost casual way, comparing what the body could endure and how long suffering could last. The details were hard to shake. Hanging, the standard punishment, rarely ended cleanly. It could drag on, depending on weight, rope, and luck. That conversation planted a simple, dangerous question in him. What if death could be quicker? Then he saw electricity do something no argument could match. An accidental contact turned an everyday use of power into a sudden death. There was no long struggle, no drawn-out failure of breath. One moment the person functioned, the next, they did not. Southwick did not treat it as a spectacle. He treated it as evidence. In his mind, electricity looked like force that could stop life instantly without the messy uncertainty of a rope. Bajat. That shift mattered because it turned curiosity into conviction. Southwick began to believe that the same energy lighting homes and powering new machines could also become a tool of punishment, faster and supposedly more humane than hanging. He did not yet have a chair or a plan or any authority to change the law, but he had a new idea with a clear promise. If the state insisted on killing, electricity seemed like the cleanest way to do it. He no longer kept the idea to himself. Albert Southwick started testing what electricity could do to living bodies, using small animals to judge speed and suffering. He recorded what he thought he saw: a sudden collapse, little struggling, a quick end. To him, it looked cleaner than hanging. That belief pushed him into a new role. He acted less like a dentist with a theory and more like a man building a case. Then he took the argument into public. Southwick wrote letters, spoke to civic groups, and leaned on the language officials cared about: certainty, control, and reduced cruelty. He described a method that could be repeated the same way every time, without the bad drops and slow strangling that haunted hangings. But the moment he made it a proposal, it stopped being an opinion. It became a problem for other people to sign their names to. Local leaders and doctors had to respond, and they did not all move in the same direction. Some treated it as modern medicine applied to punishment, a practical fix to an ugly task. Others questioned the experiments and the confidence behind them, asking what evidence actually proved it was painless. The debate forced a new question into the open. If the state had to kill, did it also have a duty to choose the least suffering? Southwick kept pressing, and the idea kept spreading. New York's leaders faced a problem they could no longer ignore. Hanging kept going wrong, drops misjudged, bodies suffered, and the state looked responsible every time it happened. So officials moved the question out of rumor and outrage and into government. A formal commission was created with one clear job: find a method that seemed more certain, more controlled, and less publicly disgraceful than the rope. This commission changed everything for Southwick's idea. Until then, electrocution had sounded like a personal crusade from a dentist with a strange conviction. Now it entered the official pipeline. The commission gathered testimony, weighed claims about pain and speed, and treated electricity as a real candidate, not a stunt. The question shifted from whether the state should listen to Southwick to whether the state should build what he imagined. Once New York considered electricity in public, the logic of the moment pulled it forward. Electricity promised a quick, decisive end, and it sounded modern in a way hanging never did. The commission did not simply debate morals, it searched for a technique the state could standardize. With that, execution began to look less like a sentence carried out by men and more like a problem solved by a system. The commission stopped treating electricity like an interesting idea and started treating it like a decision. It compared options, weighed what could be controlled, and came back to one conclusion. Electrocution offered a kind of precision, hanging did not. If the state could choose the moment, the dose, and the steps, it could promise a cleaner outcome. So the commission selected the electric chair approach, and the project moved from debate into planning. Once that choice happened, a new problem appeared immediately. Electricity did not kill on its own. People had to make it kill on purpose, the same way, every time. The commission started defining a device and a protocol together because one without the other failed. It meant deciding how the person would be held, where the contact points went, and how the current would travel through the body. Every detail became part of the method. Then came the question that turned ethics into engineering. What amount of electricity, for how long and in what sequence, actually ended a life? The commission laid out a step-by-step procedure with responsibilities that could be assigned and repeated. It aimed to reduce uncertainty, not just cruelty. But the act of writing those rules did something else too. It made electrocution a state-backed technology, and it set the stage for a battle over what kind of electricity would power it. Once New York committed to electrocution, a new problem rose fast. Electricity was not one thing. Two systems competed to power America, and now that competition touched life and death. Thomas Edison backed direct current, or DC. George Westinghouse pushed alternating current, or AC, using designs linked to Nikola Tesla. The state needed a supply. The companies saw a fight, and the execution plan became a weapon in their business war. Edison's side worked to tie AC to danger in the public mind. If AC could be shown as deadly, then DC looked safer for homes and streets. Electrocution offered a brutal kind of proof. Demonstrations and headlines did not just warn people, they aimed blame. Westinghouse resisted because every execution risked turning his product into a synonym for killing. What had started as a humane promise slid into a campaign about fear and reputation. The logic became simple and cold. If the state used AC, then the chair itself helped sell a message. This current killed. Engineers and officials still talked about volts, wiring, and reliability, but the argument outside the lab shifted. The public learned electricity through scandal and spectacle. The new execution method no longer stood apart from commerce. It sat at the center of it, pulled between invention, profit, and the power to end a human life. New York did not just approve an idea, it ordered parts. The state acquired generators, cables, switches, and meters, equipment meant for power and industry, now redirected toward execution. Officials chose Auburn Prison as the place to make it real. That decision changed everything. A proposal on paper became a construction project with deadlines, budgets, and responsibility. Someone had to assemble a system that could reliably kill on command. At Auburn, workers built the first chair around the plan the state demanded. The chair was not a symbol yet. It was a device that needed to hold a body still, route current through it, and work the same way every time. The prison had to integrate the chair with the electrical equipment and a control setup. The focus stayed practical: connections, contact points, and the ability to deliver power without hesitation. Once the chair existed, the state faced a new reality. Hanging had been an old method with old rules. This machine required new steps and new confidence. Tests and adjustments followed because a failure here meant a public disaster. The prison staff did not prepare for a moment of tradition. They prepared for a procedure. In Auburn, execution became something engineered, an outcome produced by a built system, not a rope and a fall. In 1890, the new method finally faced its first real test. The man selected by the courts was William Kemmler, a convicted murderer, and the state treated his death as proof that electricity delivered what hanging could not, a quicker end with less visible struggle. Officials prepared a strict procedure and invited witnesses. This was not just an execution, it was a public claim put into practice. When the current first surged through Kemmler's body, the room waited for the clean result everyone had been promised. Instead, the moment stretched. The equipment did not finish the job. He was still alive. The execution team stopped, then started again, forcing a second jolt into a man who had already endured the first. The promise of a simple, controlled death began collapsing in real time. The second application turned horrific. Witnesses described severe burning and a drawn-out, brutal end, and the scene looked nothing like a medical improvement over the rope. Newspapers seized on the details, and the electric chair's supporters had to defend what people now saw as a failed experiment on a human being. The first electrocution did not sell the invention. It damaged it. The first electrocution scandal did not stop the idea. It hardened it. State officials looked at the mess and still saw a promise: control. A machine did not miss the knot, did not depend on a trapdoor, and did not leave a sheriff blamed for a bad hanging. So other states copied New York's decision. One by one, laws changed. Prisons ordered chairs. Electrocution spread, not because it looked gentle, but because it looked modern. As adoption grew, the chair turned into procedure. States wrote rules for voltage, timing, and witnesses, trying to make the outcome predictable and the responsibility shared. Execution rooms got rewired. Prison staff received training that sounded like technical work, even though the goal stayed the same. When problems happened, officials adjusted settings and called it improvement. The method kept its place because it fit the era's faith in technology, and because courts accepted it as lawful punishment. By the 20th century, electrocution became a standard option across much of the country, and for many states, it became the default. The chair sat in prison systems for decades, ready for use whenever appeals ended. It also moved beyond prisons. Newspapers treated it as a headline machine, and entertainment borrowed its image until it became a cultural shorthand for death by the state. The device ended up embedded in law, routine, and memory long after its humane promise faded. By the end of the 20th century, the electric chair no longer looked like the future of humane punishment. States that once treated it as modern began to pull back. Some replaced it with other methods. Others kept it only as a backup, used in law but rarely in practice. The machine that had been sold as an upgrade over hanging now carried a different reputation. It felt outdated and it felt dangerous. That change came from what people had already seen for decades: executions that did not always go as planned. The chair depended on equipment, timing, and a body's unpredictable response to electricity. When it worked, it looked fast. When it failed, it looked like suffering made visible, and the promise collapsed in front of witnesses. Over time, the argument shifted. The question stopped being whether it was efficient and became whether it was acceptable at all. So the electric chair ended up in a strange place. It survived in memory more than in use. In a few states it remained optional, chosen by law or by the condemned, but it no longer defined the system. What stayed was the image, straps, switches, and the idea of the state delivering death through a machine. That symbol pointed back to a brutal era, far from the dental office curiosity that once started the whole path.